the first peek inside the upcoming book from former presidential candidate and Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, not surprisingly, Harris doesn't hold back when analyzing what went wrong with her abbreviated run for the White House last year. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen joins us now live from our D.C. newsroom. Good morning, Steph. So how much insight do we get really into this book?
Hey, Holly, good morning. Well, the excerpts were published by The Atlantic, and I almost don't even want to call them excerpts. What The Atlantic did was they published an entire chapter from Harris's book, 107 Days. The chapter details what exactly the former vice president did on July 24th. So just 3 days after President Biden dropped out and she was effectively anointed the next Democratic candidate for president. Beyond that, details of those days, July 24th, the chapter goes on to include other observations from her time as vice president. She describes Biden as the most consistently underestimated man in Washington, saying that even on his worst day, that he was more knowledgeable and more compassionate than now President Donald Trump. But she says she was in the worst position to try to convince President Biden to drop out of the race, saying that it coming from her would really only seem self-serving. I want to read that one portion of this book excerpt of this chapter. It says, quote, "It's Joe and Jill's decision. We all said that like a mantra, as if we'd all been hypnotized. Was it grace or was it recklessness? In retrospect, I think it was recklessness. The stakes were simply too high. This wasn't a choice that should have been left to an individual's ego, an individual's ambition. It should have been more than a personal decision." That calling the decision to allow Biden to stay in the race as long as he did reckless, there was certainly a notable word choice and notable statement there. And also her saying a personal decision. We heard that from President Biden. We heard that from his White House staff time and time again before he formally announced that he was running, that he was thinking about it, and that it was a personal decision. Now, beyond the chapter release we got from The Atlantic, there was also an editor's note from Jeffrey Goldberg, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. And he said the book is, quote, filled with surprises. He describes the vice president as blunt, occasionally profane, and slyly funny, saying that she definitely is not holding back, Holly. So again, this is just a one-chapter excerpt of her book, but a lot of notable moments and notable comments from the former vice president.
Very interesting that she's sort of peeling back the curtain. You know, we see these politicians, and a lot of times they're very, excuse me, very formal. You know, they're very concerned about what they're presenting to the world. But she seems to be a little bit more casual. What does that kind of say? I mean, I know we haven't read the whole book, but what does that kind of say about maybe her approach to the future when it comes to politics?
Well, from at least the chapter that I've been able to read, she certainly seems a little bit more unvarnished, more truth-telling to the American people. You know, we don't know what is next for the former vice president. We don't know if she plans on running for any kind of elected office again, whether that be running for president, trying to go back to the Senate, trying to be governor of California, trying to be another type of leader in California. We don't know what the future holds yet for the former vice president. We know, of course, she is about to set out on a book tour for this book that is due out later in September. But we don't really have any details about what may be next for her. And I think that's going to be a question she's probably going to get a lot while she is on this book tour, is what is next for the former vice president. And that's something that I think we all wish we knew the answer to, Holly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, too, whether she connects with people on a different level than being a politician, sort of set a bit on a pedestal. So let me ask you, too, what does she say about earlier parts of her career, specifically her term as vice president?
So she notes in this chapter, in this release that we got, that she was the first vice president to be covered by a regular press pool. So for people not familiar kind of how press coverage works, here in Washington, the president has a press pool, has a group of members of the media that track his day-to-day movements. Typically, a vice president has what's known as the supplemental pool. So only when the vice president is doing something big and notable would the press be going with them step by step. The former Vice President Harris, was the first VP to have a regular press pool. So she was constantly in the media coverage, and she feels like having that kind of constant media attention, that she says in this chapter that she feels like the Biden White House and the Biden team didn't do enough to back her up. She cites some attacks that she got from Fox News, saying that the White House didn't try to counter those Fox News critiques with her background, saying that she was a former district attorney, that she was a senator that represented 1 out of every 8 Americans, being a senator from California. She talks about a gaffe that was reported after a trip she made to France, a trip that was aimed at restoring some diplomatic relations with France, and she said the White House just kind of let that go. They didn't stress the accomplishment that she achieved in improving those diplomatic relations. I want to read another quick section of her excerpt of the chapter that we got, and she says, and when the stories were unfair or inaccurate, the president's inner circle seemed fine with it. Indeed, it seemed as if they decided I should be knocked down a little bit more. That's kind of a theme we see in this chapter, as she really kind of lays out how she would have preferred the White House respond and kind of defend and step up for her. She also noted work she did in the Northern Triangle, work she did trying to deal with the root causes of migration, saying she made big progress there, but the White House didn't want to highlight that progress, saying that they didn't have enough data, didn't have enough statistics yet. She noted a speech she made on Israel in Gaza, saying the speech went too well. It went viral, and the White House, even though they approved the speech and they approved her remarks, they were almost upset with her for delivering the speech too well. So a lot of little nuggets and little bits of insight are scattered throughout this. Again, remember, only 1 chapter of the book, and we have a lot of things that are certainly notable to talk about here, Holly. This is just a little piece. The rest of the book published later this month.
And I know that we're just getting this nugget. Has there been any response from anybody who was in the Biden administration, anybody who specifically says, oh, I remember that, or oh, that's not quite true? Or are we still kind of waiting for people to digest it all?
Still waiting. We have reached out to Biden's current staff, to the former president's staff, to ask if they have any comments. We haven't heard back just yet, but I would imagine as people are waking up this morning, this article, this excerpt was published early this morning, about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, East Coast time. So I expect President Trump to be probably commenting about this this morning. We're probably going to get a lot of comments today from Democrats and Republicans, and maybe Democrats getting some tough questions today, because that's something that has been highly criticized. Why Biden didn't drop out earlier, why Democrats stood behind him as long as they did and didn't push him to drop out before that July 21st decision and before that debate that he had with then candidate and former President Donald Trump. So I think a lot of reaction is going to come out yet today, just a little too early in the morning, East Coast time, for us to have that just yet.
It is early. All right, well, then we will check back with you to see what happens next. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen live for us. Thank you, Steph.